Thank you, Ian, I think. You can see I've gone corporate. See, he's been giving me lessons.
Oh, yes.
You know? I've got my own little pad about the wound CRC. And you can see I've done lots of preparation for this because, as John has suggested, I do get organised, but it organised in a sort of crazy way. And one of the things I thought I would do, and please do not think I'm going on till 8 o'clock. This will be 15 minutes max, all right? So you won't get pressure ulcers on your feet standing there. What we need in wound healing is 7 Ps. And that's not 7 visits to the bathroom, but it is the fact that we have to recognise that the challenge that we face in the area of wound healing and why the wound CRC is so important. First P is profile. Why does this subject have such a poor profile? Why do we struggle, and some of us, particularly those of us with a medical background, have to almost apologise to our colleagues as to why we're interested in wound healing? Why is it, at a time where we can transplant many organs, we can cure many cancers, we still cannot guarantee that a patient with a wound will see a clinician who actually knows what to do? Why do we not have a higher profile in academic circles, either in terms of grant opportunities or in terms of opportunities to raise money from one source or another? We need, in the second P, to make it a priority. And we need to make it a priority not for our own professional careers, not for the fact that we all want to be made to feel important, but for patients. The reason I got into this years ago was not to have a job in a university, to run a group that was interested in a particular subject that's pretty large and fairly high profile in our country. I did it because I think it's important that we should be looking at patients. We also need to form partnerships. And I think the partnerships is a basis of the CRC, both within the academic institutions, the clinical facilities, the clinical staff, but also an important and perhaps controversial partnership, which I think is appropriate when you're trying to raise this profile and priority, is partnerships with industry. Many of my academic colleagues feel you're dancing with the devil if you deal with industry. I disagree violently. I think you can have a true symbiotic relationship with industry, provided you recognise that you're coming into the room from different doors, and provided you accept that you have different priorities and different agendas, and you're open and honest about those agendas and what you want to get out of it. But without the role of industry in this particular subject area, we would be nowhere. Industry has been a great influencer of clinicians, academic groups, governments in actually becoming much more aware of the problem of wounds and wound healing, and without them we would be nowhere. I think we, as clinicians and as academics, need to adopt a degree of professionalism. Because without us being professional in our approach and recognising what we can and what we can't do, and being honest and realistic with our patients, having an academic underpinning both in terms of teaching and research, we will not be accepted as professionals in the way in which other professional groups are. We need to have patience with a CE on the end of it. Unlike the young Turk here, I'm becoming slightly more mature, and as I become more mature, I've realised it's much more about evolution than revolution. And many of us who've been around for a few years, and there's really some big names in the world of wound healing internationally, there's a lot of people, I'm not going to name them, they know who they are, who've made a difference. But they've made a difference because they've persevered in the subject of wound healing over many years. And the important thing is to recognise, those of us who've been in it for 10 years or more, is that much has been achieved, even if much more has to be achieved to actually take us further forward. And what we need to do is to recognise that progress has been made, but with the wound CRC and other initiatives, much more progress can be made and needs to be made to put wounds and patients with wounds in the right place. Now, who can I pick on? Is it Wendy White? Is it Helen Edwards? Is it Tabitha Rando? Who else can I see around here? They're all getting nervous now because I've got this annoying... Oh, Carolyn Carville! Ah! Oh, excuse me. El Presidente! Margot Azimuth! Is that an Australian word? Never heard it before. We need passion. Not the sort of passion you might think of normally, perhaps, but the passion for this subject, the passion for trying to make patients' lives better. Because without the passion of those people I've mentioned and many other people in this room and other people elsewhere, we would not be able to improve the lot of the last P, which is patients with a TS on the end of it. I started off about patients, and I will come back to patients in a minute. My interest in wound healing goes back a long time. I come from that tiny little town called Cardiff that has this little rugby stadium that most people down here know about, because when you lot play you usually stuff us, but that's beside the point. But I have to pay tribute to Australia and Australians, because my hero, my mentor, was Australian. Les Hughes was from Sydney, worked in Brisbane, and then came to Cardiff to be the professor of surgery many years ago. And it was Les Hughes' inspiration that produced all the work that we've done in Cardiff over the last 30, 40 years. He invented a wound dressing, silastic foam dressing or Cadicare. Many of you have never seen it. But unlike many of the other dressings that were developed, it was developed by a clinician to meet a clinical need. He was very good at making big holes in patients, but he recognised gauze packing of those big holes was not necessarily ideal or perfect. He invented this stuff, which comes from dental impression moulding material, and unlike the dressings in the 1970s, because this clinic in our hospital has been running since 1972, and no, I was not qualified at that time, Dr. Alden. The important thing is that he thought that it was important to carry out evaluations, to do research to prove exactly where, when and how this stuff should be used before it should be sold. We've had this interest in wound healing for many years. In 1991 we created the Wound Healing Research Unit, which was the first unit in our university which was entirely funded from day one. And because I have a death wish, I've accepted the risk of running that self-funded group since 1991, and I've had to raise my own salary and the salary of other people. Now, we are mere minnows in the wound healing stakes as compared to the wound CRC. $100 million, wasn't it?
110.
Bastard. But they're only Aussie dollars, so that doesn't really count.
There's a lot of in-kind as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people around us are part of that in-kind.
But he keeps telling me it's all these large sums, you see, and I get jealous.
Yes.
It actually took me 20 years to do it. I've managed to raise £45 million of funding for the Wound Healing Research Unit, and one of the things that we honestly felt we had done was helped embed wounds and wound healing in the academic world and in the clinical world. And one of the things that we launched last year was the first national wound healing centre in the world, funded by government, where we are actually able to triangulate on an all Wales basis academic activity, clinical activity, and links with the economy and industry in Wales. It's very fortuitous for us that in Wales, in the life science sector, wound healing companies are the biggest employers in Wales. There's already 2,500 jobs in Wales related to the wound industry. And we've managed to convince our government, if we triangulate or we axis around the academic, clinical end of things, we'll act as a magnet for further investment in Wales. So we have created the Welsh Wound Innovation Initiative, we have created the Welsh Wound Innovation Centre. We now have a national centre in a tiny little country with a population of only 3 million, but a national centre that is given the mandate to drive education, to drive research, to provide care for patients and act as a bridge into industry. I started off this talk talking about lots of P's. Shelley, can you show me that first thing? Is that the one thing I think it's important about what we do and what the CRC does, it's about patience. And it's not because it's not important to the CRC people, but when I saw what they were planning for this evening, I realised there wasn't a patient present to speak. So I've got a patient interview that lasts about 3 minutes, and this is a gentleman who has an abdominal wound that we've been struggling with for a long time. And what we've been trying to do, well, what we've done here is to ask him to say, what does it like to have a chronic wound?
And initially when he did the operation, and I had the stitches up the front and everything else. But of course, when we joined the pipes or the intestines, it leaked, and I got peritonitis, and I was quite poorly for a while. And I was in the intensive care for a few weeks, and then after the initial leak, he took me straight back down the following day, and I had another operation. I ended up then with ileostomy on the side, and an open wound because this wouldn't heal, simply because I had peritonitis and problems as well. And well, that's basically what happened. And I've been like this for 3.5 years. And of course, occasionally it bleeds 2-3 times a week sometimes. And it's restricted everything practically, any sort of recreation or any sort of physical work, and I'm just sort of snookered for the last sort of 3.5 years, really. That's it.
The exudate was massive. It used to come out through the dressings at the bottom and get all over his clothes. So if you went anywhere, you had to have a change of clothes with you so that you didn't end up in a mess when you wanted to look tidy and this sort of thing. Sometimes it will bleed so much that
it's impossible to stop it, really. You've got to lie down then with put some pressure on it just for the 20 minutes to try and stop it.
But the difficulty with that is, if you're out, where do you lie?
Where do you go?
How do you get your clothes off? It's just all-consuming. It becomes the main part of your life is where
it revolves solely around this, really.
The wound. Yesterday.
So really, be guided by the you people that we come to the wound clinic, and you'll say, "Oh, we'll do so and so and so and so this time," and we just take it from there, don't we?
So long as you know that there's somebody there
to put you right if you're doing it, not in the right way. That's it. Like that, isn't it? But I've got complete faith in the wound clinic and the Prof and Alison, the doctor, and I've seen those for quite a long time.
It has helped us an awful lot. It's given us a lot of encouragement and puts things into perspective a little bit. You come here and you're treated like normal people because you don't feel like normal people a lot of the time. So.
But like I say, it's been a vast difference to me, to my confidence as well, and it's not even for the fact that the nurse dealing with it said, "Oh, it is getting smaller or whatever," and it gives you a little bit more confidence, really, I suppose. But that's it. Yeah, it's a great asset, I think, anyway.
Okay, hopefully we can accept that we've had patient involvement, patient engagement in this evening's celebration, and I think it's important from what that patient was saying, how much of a burden having a wound and a wound that won't heal on him and his wife. What I thought I would do was to actually look at those 7 P's that I came up with at the beginning and what the Wound CRC has done or will do to actually help in those areas. In terms of profile, the $110 million has made a huge difference. It's a huge difference to the subject. It's a huge difference for Australia because look what you can achieve, look what you have achieved. In terms of priority, I understood from discussions earlier today, there are 32 CRCs, 6 of them are in healthcare. Isn't it interesting, of the 6 in healthcare, 1 is on wounds? It is important to see that as a big development here in Australia. I think the partnerships that I've witnessed over the recent past with the CRC is there. There are partnerships amongst clinicians or between clinicians, with academics and academic institutions, and with industry. I think there are partnerships within cities and towns, there are partnerships across states, there are federal partnerships, and there are also international partnerships, links into Canada and links into the UK. There's professionalism. ORMA, which is hopefully soon to become Wounds Australia, we have a professional group that's run in a professional way that's actually getting stronger by the day. I do apologise if I'm going to offend anybody. You also have data. Not data, but data. Those of us who come from the old country call it data. But you seem, everybody down here seems to sort of call it data. But never mind, that's just me. You have patience, and you've had patience with the CE. You might think there's not much patience with the young Turk here, but I think he's been very patient in actually recognising the challenge that he's facing. I leave you to decide whether the people involved in the CRC have been passionate or not, but anybody who can send me compromising photographs, I'll be very gratefully receiving. The final P was the patients, and the patients, we said, were at the centre of this. And I'm absolutely delighted that every time I come here, I hear the latest development that is focused around patients. And you'll hear after I've finished, and you've had a quick break, I think, that there is lots of developments around patients with the TS on the end of things. But I want to leave you with one thought. It may seem a little bit far-fetched, but there's 2 things I want you to see when you look at this video. One, are we heading down the road to get where we want to be with this? And the other thing is, just tell me if you think this is Ian Griffith.
Number 1.
This is how I feel all the chronic wounds, Dr. Aldens. See, it's Ian Griffith! It's Ian Griffith!
Because I really wasn't paying attention.
No, we never pay
No,
attention.
don't pay attention to you.
Now this is the best bit. This is what we do in our wound clinic.
Boy, he will do anything.
This is Michelle Gibb with that funny wig on.
Plans that till tomorrow. Still got 24 months.
That's what we need to do, just like that.
Why we don't have one stage? We will.
See, we're thinking about holistic approach. Pain now, pain. Got healing, no scarring. Now we're into pain.
Probably just a symptom of stage.
That's definitely Ian Griffiths. Thank you very much.